attending online, if you could just make sure your camera is on. So welcome, Helmut, and also making sure that you use the hand function if you do wish to ask a question. And just noting, of course, that making sure our microphones are on, otherwise those online and those watching the live stream won't be able to hear us. Okay, we'll now move through to the emergency procedures. Please take a moment to note those. If you could make sure your phone is switched to silent. Okay, we'll go to our opening karakia. Whakataka tahau ki te uru, whakataka tahau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hiaki ana te atakura, he tio, hei huka, hei hauhu, tihei mauri ora. Apologies, so I've just got one apology from Representative Andrea Rutini, so I'll move that her apology be accepted. Do I have a seconder? Okay, Representative Rahina August, and all those in favour say aye. All those against? Declare that carried. Okay, moving through to public comment. I don't believe we've got any members of the public who wish to speak, so we'll move straight through to conflict of interest declarations. Any conflicts to declare? No? Okay, we'll go to the meeting minutes, which are on page 9 of the agenda. So this is for the meeting on the 26th of July. Any issues with those minutes around the correctness of them? No? Okay, so I'll move that those minutes be accepted. Do I have a seconder? Mia Baker. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Moving through to... Oh. Okay, yep, we'll just note abstention. Okay. Moving through the Chair's update. So I just thought I'd give a brief update on what's been happening since we last met. Recent annual water loss numbers for the 23-24 financial year estimate that the total water loss in the metropolitan Wellington region over the past financial year has dropped by 3% from 44 to 41, which includes both public and private leaks. So I just want to pass on my thanks to all of the shareholding councils who provided additional funding in the second half of this year to find and fix leaks. As at the start of the month, we had a backlog of 509 open public network leaks across the region against the backlog of 1,720 as at January this year. Wellington Water also tracks private leaks to monitor water loss and works with homeowners to fix those leaks in their private properties, because we know that's a challenge as well. And there is, of course, a report on those leak numbers in this paper, which we'll be able to discuss later on as well. With the increased council investment and increased efforts from Wellington Water to reduce the backlog of leaks in the region, as of early September, most of the metropolitan councils have now reached the point where the backlog is at a sustainable level, where the number of leaks received, basically the average number of leaks received over a 10 working day period, and there are more leaks on private land than there are on the public network. So it does change, I suppose, the challenge which is in front of us, but we need to be very clear that, of course, the longer term solution to the leak problem is our renewal program over a longer period of time. Lastly, just before we get into the meeting, I would like to welcome Pat Doherty as the new Chief Executive of Wellington Water. So welcome, Pat, and obviously there will be an opportunity for you to say hello to the committee in your new role, though you are certainly no stranger here as well. Pat is a water engineer by profession and has extensive people leadership, local government and infrastructure and asset management experience. And we're looking forward to seeing Pat's leadership as we grapple with some of the challenges of our ageing network, increasing requirements for investment and the financial constraints of councils along with water reform. So welcome again, Pat. Okay, so I'll now move through to item 7, which is the Local Water Done Well Legislation and Water Services Delivery Plan Update. Dougal, welcome. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Committee, for the opportunity to give you an update on what's happening with Local Water Done Well. Just a few things to cover in terms of the update today. We continue to make good progress across the region on the regional process to respond to the Local Water Done Well legislative framework. And the key legislative change, which of course happened since the last committee meeting, is that the local Government Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Act has passed into law on the 2nd of September. So all councils now, local councils in the country, must produce a water services plan by the 3rd of September next year. So as was noted at the Porirua City Council elected members briefing yesterday, we've got about 11 months to achieve that target. So we continue to make good progress there and are responding to that in line with the government announcements around the direction of Bill 3, which will set out the enduring framework for local water done well, and also the financing arrangements which were announced by the local government funding authority. Really good news around that financing arrangements, and we'll continue to engage with the LGFA around their requirements in the process for that. Since the last meeting, we've also had further meetings with the Advisory Oversight Group and council officers to continue to develop the recommended regional model and have continued to work on the financing and network economic modelling as well. The regional report on what we're outlining is a recommended best for region approach to respond to local water done well will be issued to councils in early October, and that'll support council briefing sessions. Most of our councils are halfway through processes of briefing elected members around local water done well. Wellington City briefed elected members on Tuesday, Porirua City yesterday, Hutt City next Tuesday. The Wairarapa councils have briefings in mid-October, and most of our councils are looking at taking papers to council meetings at the end of October, which will seek direction around either remaining in the waka for the regional process and or other options around that as well. In support of ensuring we can maintain momentum post those decisions, we're also planning for the next phase of work, which is really the actual delivery of the water services plan and implementation plan. So our effort will step up in that next phase of work, and we're starting to plan what's required in terms of the outputs, the resources required, and that'll help give councils increased certainty around funding and resourcing that will be required, including the input we'll need from Wellington Water, and that'll support those council consultation and decision-making processes as we head into the end of the year and early next year. As members will be aware, we've had some really useful feedback, particularly through councils and through the Advisory Oversight Group. Some of the consistent themes that have come through around the robustness of the numbers and the modelling. And as you'll be aware, we're undertaking a peer review of that modelling, and we have updated and rerun the financial model as well. And what we've been able to do with that is try and find some real opportunities for reducing overall costs. So when you do see the updated numbers, they will be a little bit lower than some of the numbers that we've previously reported to you, as we've continued to refine what we think is the required investment over the next 10 to 20 years. The in-principle decisions by councils about whether to continue with a water services plan, joint water services plan, it will be challenging. The timeline is challenging and the amount of information that councils will have, but all councils have put in place briefings and times to get decisions from councils about whether to continue with the process or not. And as you'll be aware, there's a number of other models and groupings that are being considered, including the Wairarapa councils, Kapiti, Horowhenua, and Horizons, etc. Price, obviously a key question, price and affordability, and with the recommended model, we're trying to put in place some clear principles around how we can manage those risks around concerns about paying for someone else's problems or price shocks or affordability to communities. But I think one of the challenges, as was discussed yesterday in Porirua, prices will go up, and this is going to be quite a challenging message to deliver to our communities. And the last bit of work to inform that is the financial impacts on councils and debt and equity transfer. And we have an independent piece of work underway at the moment to look at all councils' debt positions and the equity of that to inform what might be the transfer of debt to a new entity, which will be quite considerable on day one, given you've all ramped up your investment programs over the next 3 years. Lastly, just wanted to note some transitional issues and kind of relevant to some of the papers on the agenda today. As Wellington Water moves forward, we will need to work more closely with Wellington Water staff over the next phase of work. While the recommended model is for a new water services organisation, we need to make sure that we're aligning the planning for that with some of the really important work that Wellington Water is progressing. And just some examples there, the paper you have today around the IT investment systems is an example of making sure we get alignment of that investment in that program. Also as an opportunity to de-risk some of the work that would be required to set up a new organisation should councils be minded to go down that pathway. But also those other aspects there around contracts, contractor engagement and staff communications are some of the things that we'll need to ramp up. So we look forward to working with Pat in his new role and continue to bring you updates on this program moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any questions for Dougal from members? Thank you very much. Okay, now we can move through to item 8, which is the your agenda. So if Charles Barker, Patrick and Nick Leggett would like to come forward. So Charles has obviously been in the acting role for a bit of time with Pat. How long now, Pat? Two weeks? 7 days. 7 days. Great, excellent. Well, I'll pass it over to the three of you and then we can open it up for questions.
Morena Kato. Thanks for the opportunity to address you today. You will have read the report and I will save most of my comments to you for later in the agenda when we talk about the plan. But I just also want to acknowledge the appointment of Pat Doherty. The board and I think the organisation is very much in the position of uncovering, confronting and hopefully improving the organisation on your behalf. And the teams, the kaimahi across the organisation are united in that. And I think the appointment of Pat is the best demonstration that we can give you. We appreciate the positivity in which the committee has received Pat's appointment. And it's great that we can have somebody who can have their feet under the desk after 7 days and really start to grasp and to deal with some pretty significant challenges. And our view is, the board's view is that the review and our response to the budgetary error so far will lead us to uncovering more challenges with the organisation as we move along. The difference will be in the way that Wellington Water handles significant issues as they arise. And our intention will be that as problems are uncovered, that they are elevated to the board, they're communicated to shareholders, and then they're worked through and solved, that they're not buried. And so working on that assumption and that practice, there's been significant work as directed by the board into understanding the exact quantum of the budgetary error. And prior to the review, we estimated that just over $35 million of corporate costs had been properly applied to the capital program and that there was a funding gap of about 51 million. There's been a much deeper dive into that. And so there's sort of good and bad out of it. The bad is that it's slightly more than 51. It was 51.5 million. But due to internal business planning for the triennium, the initial forecast for the total corporate cost needed is actually lower than the estimate that was supplied to councils in their LTP. So the funding gap has been dropped to about 40.5 million from that initial 51. So I'm putting that up front today. We know this, and I wanted to share it with you as early as possible, but the detail of that and your individual council's positions will be communicated later next week once the final checks have been done on that. I should say that the review has been independently verified by Deloitte. So councils, to give the board wanted that confidence, we know that you would want that confidence as well as shareholders. And that is where we're currently at there. We felt it was very important to communicate to you exactly the situation rather than sort of play guesswork. just a couple of other points. The board is more aware of the need for governance relationships between ourselves and yourselves. And we've had a couple of requests from councils to come and meet, and we're looking forward to doing that in the next little while. But also with mana whenua governance, and so we can understand the specific issues, challenges, and the perspectives that you bring, because it is important that while there's a collective view here often at the committee, there are particular individual situations. We expect to be directly accountable to you. And in return for that, we'll offer you honesty about what we're dealing with in the condition of your assets and the level of investment that we believe is advisable in those assets. You'll note that there's been a request by the board to come to individual audit and risk committees to really work through some of those issues, kanohi ki te kanohi. So that will be that will occur. The board has also taken a sort of a greater focus on health and safety in the organisation. We've developed our own framework, which will be driven through the organisation, and that will happen progressively over time. But the budgetary era, I think, has led to some reassessment about governance oversight, and we're taking, we've taken the opportunity to look at the sort of key components of governance with Wellington Water, and we're working through that. And I think it's also provoked questions within the organisation, and having a new chief executive with a fresh lens has also, will also aid us in that. Just to reinforce, Mr. Chair, your sort of statements around water leaks, it's clear that due to council's additional funding, there's been very significant progress made this year with leaks, and I want to thank you and acknowledge you for that. Literally thousands have been fixed since the 1st of January this year, and that is a direct result of that additional resource. And there has been public behavioural change in terms of, I think, households monitoring their own consumption, which is also really positive. And so I think we're looking at about 4 million litres saved per day across the metropolitan region. What I do want to temper the good news with is that it is just a stopgap, that while we're monitoring closely and preparing the plans for summer, we can't predict rainfall across the region. We can't predict any other events that could put our ability to supply water through summer, and that's just the reality of the situation. And I know that committee members are all aware of that. But you'll see in the reports today that we're on track to renew about 9.1 kilometres of pipe this year, to 24 kilometres last year. Wellington Water's recommendation is that we should be renewing 100 kilometres a year, and that's just to keep us sort of our head above board. Now, there are particular financial constraints, and we recognise that, but we will keep reinforcing that, because that's the reality we face. And I'm hopeful that it will be a motivation for all of us to not only aim for the new water entity that you're working so hard on, but actually that Wellington Water has the best systems and the best advice to provide that entity with its basis when it's formed. And so from day one, it can operate as effectively as it needs to for the region. Hand over to Charles, unless there are any questions.
Any questions for Nick? Yep, Mia Whānau.
This might be for later, so all good to delay. So I'm quite interested in we know with previous reports there was a issue of kind of cultural sort of issues. And by the way, congratulations, Pat. Great feedback from Wellington City Council on your appointment. So yeah, it's great to have you in that role. And we're expecting great things. But I'm very interested to know how we deal with that moving forward. And I also note that there was a higher than usual staff turnover for the previous bit. And just quite keen to hear more, but also happy to wait.
Look, I could address it now because I knew that there would be interest, and so I have prepared something on culture specifically, and because I think, look, I think we all know that it's probably the basis of many of our challenges. So I will address that. Kia ora.
Yep.
Again, my question might be for later as well, but I'm interested in the relationship between leaks and leak mitigation and that pipe renewal, and the fact that we're doing really well on the leaks and we've seen a decrease in the amount of water being wasted as a result. But if we're falling woefully behind on our pipe renewal, are we actually getting anywhere?
So no, we're not. That pipe reliability is decided by a range of factors: age, material, and the ground conditions. But there's one inexcusable issue, that the older the pipes get, the more they are likely to fail. So it's great that we're doing all we can to repair the leaks, but until we get our renewals up to a stage where we're at least matching the rate at which they age, then you're going to have to put more and more money into leak repairs. An interesting thing that has occurred since I've been chief executive is I get a direct email advising of any pipe breakages, and so far I think there's been one a day. There shouldn't be one a day. There hasn't been one today so far, and look, and I don't think it's because I've started. I'm quite sure of that, but you really do need to ramp up your renewals budgets, or be braced for your responsive maintenance budgets to continue to ramp up, and your levels of service to drop, because every time a pipe breaks, there's another neighbourhood that's out of water for 10 hours or 24 hours. So look, I know it's a challenge. I know when I left local government, it was the worst it's been, and it hasn't got better since. But I do implore you to consider that in your annual planning process, is renewals. Thank you.
Councillor Conley.
In the new water services entity work that we've been doing with Dougal, Dougal's offsider Dave came up with a phrase, and now I can't remember what it's called, but it was something like catastrophic network meltdown. Essentially, where the network is in such a poor condition that you have no money to put into the proper renewals of the network, and you need to spend all your money on the maintenance. And even when you put all your money into the maintenance, you still end up getting behind with the maintenance work. Can you think of the phrase I'm using? What was it? Network fault runaway. How close are we actually to network fault runaway?
Some heads up would have been useful, Dougal. It really would have. So I think the sooner you turn things around and start to ramp up your renewals expenditure, the better. Yeah, it worries me a lot. But I suppose two things that worry me more is the lack of drought security, down to 1 in 13 years. I touched on that, I think, the last time I was here, but that's very, 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 very bad for a water supply that supplies 450,000 people. Provided there's enough rain, we should be able to get enough water into the top of the pipe to supply people and cope with the leaks. But if we get a drought, it'll be a different story altogether. And the other one is our treatment plants, our wastewater treatment plants, that they need a lot of maintenance work and a lot of renewals done. But the problem is, to do that, you need to shut something down. There is no spare capacity. But that's one of my big nightmares as well, is a catastrophic failure of a key portion of a treatment plant. So, but yes, the water supply network worries me in terms of the amount of money that's being poured in, and it's not a good investment continuing to patch the leaks. There was one street we went to 5 times in 6 days to patch a leak, but it's an old pipe, doesn't like to be dug up, and every time we shake the pipe, it would break 20 metres further down the street. So we're back the next day and the next day and the next day. And we probably spent the thick end of $70,000 patching leaks in that street, and at the end of the day, you still have an old pipe that needs replacing in the street. So it is a problem. I also worry about our wastewater network because it's just as old and just as long, but the thing is when those pipes break, it doesn't come to the surface. But we do get increased blockages, increased dry weather overflows, and we're working on developing stats about that as well. So it's not just water supply, it's your wastewater network as well. So it's a lot of money required soon. And so one of the things that is desperately needed is for this new organisation to be established and have the ability to raise its own debt and start ramping up investment levels. But again, I implore you to seriously consider increased capital investment in the next annual plan. So.
I'll just add that the lack of renewals and maintenance of the valves. So we get a leak, a burst, and then we have to isolate it. The similar under-resourcing of the valves as per the pipes means that it's getting harder and harder to isolate within a contained area the actual problem. So Kent Terrace was an example of that, where we started to have to expand into the city wider and wider as each valve fails or doesn't work properly. We have to find 3 more valves that do work to isolate the same area, which gets a bigger footprint. And Days Bay, again, was an example of a level of service impact and also an impact to the environment, which was caused by valves. So the same under-resourcing of the pipes plays out with the valves, which impacts our ability to maintain service.
Thank you. So moving through, any comment from you, Charles, Pat, on the balance of the report?
I just talked about valves. The only other thing is that would have given an indication that the company's turning its head to make sure that we provide all the annual planning and LTP advice. And so we're engaging with the councils to ensure that's a smooth build-up and understand your needs. And we also acknowledge that there is a lot of attachments and reports to the governance. There's a process underway to standardise the reports, make them easier to read. And the first one of those was our water dashboards, and we'll progressively move forward because I'll be the first to acknowledge that large volumes of printouts are not that useful. Thanks.
Any other questions? No? Okay. So what we'll do now is move through to the recommendation, which is to receive and note the report. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Mayor Baker. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Moving through to the Wellington Water Annual Report for the year ending 30th of June 24. Mark Ford. Welcome, Mark. Any comments you'd like to make, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Kia ora. The 24 financial year was a very challenging year for the company. Performance and service levels were below expectation. Financially constrained company put a pressure on the whole organisation. The increased funding from councils went to the tune of $467 million, which is a 22% increase. So we're certainly very grateful for that. Made a significant improvement. $329 million capital program, which is a $25 million increase. So we're certainly grateful for that increase in funding. Most of the other key points have been mentioned. Acute water shortage was a very big focus for the company and put pressure right across the company, and the wastewater treatment plant asset conditions has put significant pressure across the company. Really proud of the team and how they responded to the incidents, and showed real resilience across the year as well. Thank you.
Any questions? If there are no questions, then we'll move through to the recommendations, which are 3 noting recommendations on page 81. So I'll move them. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Connolly. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Thanks, Mark. Item 10, which is the acute water shortage risk. This is on page 160 of the agenda, which will have Charles taking the lead on this one. So Charles, over to you.
Thank you. As mentioned before, my key takeaways from the report would be that private leaks are on the track to exceed the public. We're working with each council to ensure there's an agreed narrative about how we address that and what type of actions are appropriate to address that. So we'll be working with your teams to do that. It's really pleasing to see that regionally we're on target to meet the agreement with Taumata Arawai. So that's really heartening. And also we'll be working with your staff to look at how we engage closer with the commercial users to make sure that there's a standardised set of advice to them that we achieved last year, at the end of last year, but we would need to start off on the right foot and also work around how we make sure that they are, we have a good understanding of the amount of water that they are using and helping them with that. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Deputy Mayor Salaford.
Thanks, Charles. I understand that this is the Metropolitan Acute Water Shortage Risk, but where does South Y fit? What reporting and dashboards and investigation are you doing for us?
We provide, it's a different circumstance, but we provide, we improved that over the last year. The last year, I would acknowledge that the acute water shortage probably caught us not as prepared as we want to, and a lot of attention did go on the metropolitan region and we didn't acknowledge that that information would spill over the hill into your area and create confusion. So this year we're working much harder with your staff to ensure that as we build up, similar products are provided all the way through. In terms of risk, your risk profile stays the same as last year, and yeah, and we need to keep articulating the difference there between the two networks.
Councillor Conley.
Can you please talk me through this idea of a sustainable backlog? So I understand it's the number of, I understand what it is, the number of leaks received over 10 days. And so everyone's current backlog is lower than the sustainable backlog. But I guess at a deeper level, what does it signify? And, you know, given that we know the number of leaks being reported at the moment is low because it's winter and because everything's soaking wet and nobody can identify leaks from puddles of rain, we would suggest that once things dry out, that's going to go up massively. So, you know, what is that sustainable backlog number telling us?
The sustainable, if we go outside the sustainable level, then you would expect that we're losing control of the water loss. So it's really important that as we head through summer, that we can keep that in the green. And at this stage, everything indicates that we can, as long as we've got funding. So what we're trying to give is a reassurance that our resources in terms of teams and things are sufficient, but that is dependent on the funding. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question there.
Well, I guess the number of leaks that we are aware of is one measure, but it's not actually a very good measure of how many leaks there are in the network. So, and yet we're using a sustainable backlog measure, which is a measure of just how many people are ringing in. That doesn't seem terribly helpful when actually we know that number varies due to a whole bunch of environmental factors. And if we actually had you know, I know we don't because we don't have meters, but if we actually had a proper picture of the leaks in the network, would we still say we have a sustainable backlog?
There are, one thing I suppose to note is that we have a leak team that goes out and proactively finds the leaks, so we're not dependent on the public reporting leaks. So we have programs that go out and find leaks. You're right, it's easier to find leaks in the summer because there's usually a physical evidence of them. And we expect that to go up. I think what we're trying to say is that we are confident where the funding's available that we can keep on top of that with the funding that's available from most of the councils. So I'm not sure if I'm going around. I can't say what is an accurate statement is we can never probably know that we've found all the leaks. That's a very difficult thing to do. Yep.
So the other thing we do, of course, is we're tracking daily demand and tracking that as a rolling average. And we know where we need to get that to try and get us through the acute water shortage. And we're on track at the moment. So if we weren't, then you suspect that there were a lot of leaks that we weren't picking up. But at the moment, the two indicators are aligned. So we think that provided there's enough rain this summer, we should be okay.
I think one other clarification is the importance of this is the best we can do with the data that we can gather. The fundamental thing that we're lacking is universal meters, because we can't actually also articulate for certain how much leakage is occurring on the private side. So with the data that we've got, this is the best information that we can produce.
So I had a couple of other questions. Yeah.
When I say we should be okay, that's provided we keep getting enough money to fix the leaks all through the year, and particularly through the summer period. And if we have to stop repairing leaks, then we'll be in trouble.
At the last meeting, I asked for a bit more information on leaks and like how much money had been put into leak repair and what the correlation between that and water loss was. And that's sort of in here, but I was interested that, as I understand it, some of the councils that have put the most money into leak repair weren't necessarily seeing the biggest numbers in water loss reduction. That was just my, off the top of my head, statistical analysis. Is that correct?
Without trying to explain it, because I know I've got engineers behind me, there's demand, which is consumption and water loss. Where leaks target water loss and reduce water loss, but through the season there's variations in the consumption, and summer people use more, an industry might start using its water more, and so therefore when we provide the water demand graphs, that's actually got consumption and water loss, because we can't accurately separate them at that level. And so you will see investment by a council in water loss activities, but maybe demand's gone up because an industry's increase some usage, and because we divide depending on the council, some of those industries use a lot of water and they use it at different times in different months. So looking for a direct correlation between that investment and demand that's tricky.
Also, it's not a straight line in terms of costs for repairs. I mean, one of the biggest factors can be reinstatement, and if it's asphaltic concrete or under brick paving, those sorts of things, it can cost an arm and a leg more, and also the depth of the pipe and access to it. So it can be hard to draw a straight relationship between the cost of the leaks and fixing the leaks and what we achieve from it.
My final question on this is just around the private leaks, and exactly what role does Wellington Water have in identifying, monitoring and reporting on those private leaks? There's quite good information here, but I wasn't sure where the line between Wellington Water and TAs sat in terms of the private leak.
Technically, our responsibility finishes at the Toby, but when we're doing work, we often find that we often identify the leak. Sometimes the first thing we've got to do is identify if it's our leak or their leak, because it might be happening around the Toby. We have an agreed system with all the councils about how we notify the household that there is a leak occurring on their side, and that's through a series of letters. The subsequent actions vary a little bit between each council because it comes down to bylaws. And that's, I think, earlier on today, last year we made it clear that we agreed that we didn't have much of a mandate to tell the private user what to do with their leaks while our leakage was so high. That narrative is changing, and that's what I undertook that we would come and talk to your councils, because that's a sensitive topic. And we need to make sure that each council is aligned. Ideally, we'd like a regional approach, but we will work with each council to achieve the best outcome.
Okay, any other questions? Mayor Guppy, then Mayor Baker.
Just on point 21, where you're talking about dealing with, working with some of the largest non-residential water users, what does that entail, and is that having any effect on their day-to-day operations?
One of the key things that we'd like to do with the commercial users is work with them to improve the measurement. Each of them have their own meter. Sometimes that meter is privately owned by them and publicly owned. Probably what is true is that all the meters are quite old, and old meters don't read accurately. So there's two things. We'd like to improve our information so we attribute where the water is going the right way, but also those large users have all been exceptionally good last year about asking us how do they improve their water usage and how do they get better advice. And so that comes back to what we were developing last year about some advice to commercial users, and we want to standardise that and make sure that we provide that in a really coherent fashion. So it's not about restricting their water use in any way. We don't have the mandate for that.
Mayor Baker.
Thank you. I've probably asked before, but I think we're down to about 30 leaks in Porirua at the moment, and that's all very well, but I see that we're only funded to the end of April, so we've obviously got budget constraints, and Upper Hutt is January. So what is that going to do for both of us? And are we actually pushing out our people who are not fixing their private leaks? Seems to go on for months and months and months. Why are we not fixing those a lot quicker and then slamming an invoice on them? Because the amount of water that's actually going, if they're having to pay it, if it was metered, would be huge. And I just think that the private leakers are getting away, whereas having to do it faster. And yes, we need to keep our leak replacements, but actually our renewals are much more important. So what's going to happen for Upper Hutt and Porirua City there?
Historically, we've spread the budget over the entire year, but with the agreement with the Taumata Arawai and the direction of the councils the priority was to address the risk this summer. So therefore, we've aimed to have the most impact by the peak of summer, where the risk would be the highest. So that pulls the spread of funding depending on the council. There is a shortfall for Porirua and Hutt City. So there is a question there. We've done what we undertook to do, which was de-risk the region's acute water shortage. In terms of the private leaks, I think that comes back. And it's really, ideally what we want is a shared appetite to address those private leaks in the same way. And so again, that's what I was saying about coming back and talking to each of the councils, but we are open to making the most progress we possibly can with the private leaks.
So Wellington Water will put that onto the councils, because we need to be doing more on these private leaks, and it concerns me that it's Upper Hutt and Porirua that are not funded correctly there, obviously, in that table on 13.
Yeah, that's if we keep up the tempo, that's when the funding would run out. As I outlined, the council could ask us to spread that funding across the whole year, but that would erode the ability to reduce the acute water shortage in the summer period. But we're talking with your councils about those respective shortfalls.
Can I just add one point? Historically, it doesn't go well when a council goes on private property to do work, particularly on an old water service. You fix it, and it breaks a metre down the pipe, and you broke that pipe. I expect you to replace it. And then there's emails to councillors and mayors. Anything that a council does or pays for to do on private property is expected to last forever. And so I think in my entire water career, I have fixed one leak on private property. It was an 84-year-old lady with no relatives. So we fixed hers, but that's the only time. It is high risk. It's better to sharpen up your processes so that the landowners fix them themselves.
So second to that then, so we put on our water leaks where they are. Do we do that for our private ones to say where they are? So everyone sees where our leaks are.
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
I should have added too that our comms plan for this acute summer period also has a much greater increased focus on the private to start building up that narrative and start moving the narrative from kind of we've done our part and we've got our leaks down on the public side. Now we're going to start asking you to do the same. That's the change in the narrative from last year.
Charles, just to further clarify on that table, so what in practical terms does that mean for the overall backlog of leaks? Because I assume that if funding's going to run out to fix leaks in a certain area, the backlog's going to grow. So do you have any projections on what that looks like with the current table here, obviously for Upper Hutt and for Porirua in particular?
Yes, so at this stage, we forecast that there would be, at the end of the financial year, about 800 leaks in total across the network, and half of those would be in Upper Hutt if the funding stops in January. What always happens, as soon as you stop patching, it runs away. Porirua obviously a much smaller percentage because it's so close to the next financial year.
And that's currently being worked through at the individual councils to explain that to their elected members so they can decide what they do with that?
Yes, we've been providing a series of water dashboards and a series of packages of information about the situation for each council, and we've also been providing that to Taumata Arawai, who increasingly is comfortable with the position that we are heading into this summer, but past February is starting to look forward to saying, well, are all reasonable steps being taken?
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. So we will receive and note the recommendation, receive and note the report, and also I've got some additional recommendations here, which is to note the importance of a coordinated regional approach to managing private leaks, notes progress across the region to reduce leaks as a short-term measure to reduce water loss, and notes that renewing and replacing ageing infrastructure and maintenance is essential for long-term sustainability of the network. We'll just remove maintenance there actually, because that kind of maybe confuses it. The main point is around that renewal program as being the solution. So I think it's really important here that we are not self-congratulatory on getting on top of the leak issue that has been reported, because we know the real solution here is that longer-term investment in renewals. Okay, so I'll move those. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Connolly, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Okay, now moving through to item 11, which is the implementation of findings of the cost estimation review. And we have Helen and Julia Lander. Nick, you're going to come as well. No, I don't. Okay, we might, no, that's all good. We've got obviously the team here, so I'll pass it over to you to speak to the report, and then we'll open up for questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. With me is Mahina Pukitapu, who is Director of Wellington Water, and there are only 4 directors left now, but both Leanne Southey and Bill Bayfield are unable to be here today, but Mahina and I are here to present to you and to answer any questions. So the plan that the outline of the plan that you have in front of you is the result of a sort of significant amount of work, both with an external consultant, Suzanne Carter, who worked on the original budgetary error review, but also Charles leading a team within Wellington Water. And I want to acknowledge that and actually thank the organisation I've seen as chair, and I think we felt a real enthusiasm through the organisation to get things on a better footing. And the board recognises the the lack of confidence in the committee and in the wider public of Wellington Water in recent months. And so the review made it really clear that the current state of the organisation's maturity falls short of what you would expect. And the result of that is here, both with the organisational capability plan, but also actually even the strategy that's on the pages before that the board and senior staff have put together on page 190 and 191. That's really the sort of the direction on a couple of pages and the priorities with real outcomes that we're putting in front of you today to get a sense as to whether we've got that right in your mind as shareholders and customers of Wellington Water between now and the day that Wellington Water folds into a new water entity. And so the organisational capability plan, that sort of plan on a page there, 193, that's really the blueprint about how we see moving forward, that the changes and the improvements and the investments and where those need to be made. So we obviously took action to investigate the error, and this is that the 7 areas outlined here are where we feel risks need to be reduced, and that both immediate and medium-term work and investment on processes, systems and controls need to be made. I want to make special mention of the cultural issues that we have and you have identified over time, and I think that was, I don't mean to name you, Councillor Connolly, but you were on the ball, I think, when you have talked about and being fully. What we'll hopefully see here is weave through this plan, through many parts of what's being proposed to be improved, that you will see culture reflected, and the particular cultural theme is ways of working. That's the one that we've really honed in on. And we've obviously got other matters that need to be drawn to your attention. So this plan that you'll see here, there's a much deeper document which draws on the 34 key recommendations that were made by that earlier budgetary review. And what we've been thinking about, and you will appreciate this will be a living plan, because the impact that these initiatives have on lifting Wellington Water's capability, both immediately but crucially in readiness for that new water organisation, some of those are going to have to be trimmed and changed as we go along. But at the centre of the plan is that need for Wellington Water to drive the strategic initiatives that you've identified in the statement of intent and that we've agreed on together, but also to manage your assets and the delivery of your 3 waters effectively in the medium term to the Water Committee's expectations, and those remain unchanged. So the plan also sets out the initiatives that must be undertaken to address the issues raised in that review, but also to enable Wellington Water and a new future entity to become strong and capable. So we've got to address priority issues now and begin to de-risk that future entity, because if some of the work outlined is not undertaken in the near term, a new entity will have to begin its life either establishing or correcting, which is not good enough, and we'll start from behind. So the support of the Water Committee to remedy the deficiencies and to enable Wellington Water to lift its organisational capability is a really important step on this path as we move into a new reality, which will of course be an economically regulated asset-owning water entity. The funding and investment decisions relating to Wellington Water's organisational funding have been heavily coloured over time by the anticipation of reform. So, we thought that, by now we'd be in a new entity under the 3 Waters plan. And I think it was probably easy for us to say, look, we'll just hold off and we'll be in a new entity and problems will be able to be fixed. We thought that there'd be a full suite of digital capabilities that would be part of that. had that occurred, this shift would have been in alignment of the functions and outputs of the organisation with the new operating model, and that it would have meant the decommissioning of Wellington Water's aged and outdated systems, and that would have all been taken care of. But, that hasn't happened, and the board's view is that decisions on those systems can't be deferred now. We actually have to grasp them. As you all know, Wellington Water's workload has increased a lot in the last few years. The organisation's almost doubled in size in the last 4 years, and this has, been in response to greater capital investment and, investment choices by councils. And then we've got the recent challenges around leak repairing and the threat of acute water shortage through summers, and managing that ongoing non-compliance with wastewater treatment plants across the region. So the challenges associated with deterring assets continue to feature very highly on our internal risk register. And without fuller funding over time, I think we emphasise this to you all the time, but without fuller funding over time, particularly for asset renewals, those risks to service provision will continue. So additional responsibilities will soon fall on us to install, to scope the case firstly, and then install volumetric water meters across the region, the metropolitan region. And while this initiative is essential to alleviate pressure on the region's water shortage risk, standing up and operationalising that work will place further stress on Wellington Water's current operating model. And that operating model has been seeing change happening organically, but not managed in a deliberate way. I think we see that played out in the errors that we've observed and been part of. So the review found that the organisation has a confusing and inefficient structure, which exasperates weaknesses and double downs, and that you see that reflected in siloism and adding that a large operational function like the metering work into the mix needs to be undertaken with a view to creating a future state that is as efficient and effective as possible, and that will transition really easily into the new entity. And that new entity will be customer focused from the outset. So further, it's been made clear to the board that key information risks and operational issues that should have been elevated to us had been suppressed or obscured. So we've taken internal steps in recent months to really improve that situation and get amongst it within the organisation and understand what's happening and being proactive in that. And we've now got a lot more confidence that as problems arise, that they're raised with us immediately. And we're working through. That's why Pat's aged in the last 7 days. We're working through often historic issues and associated organisational practices to solve these, but they will take some time. But the board's committed to doing that and being upfront with you and working with Pat and the senior leadership, in fact, all kaimahi to work through that. So we've seen organisational growth coupled with ongoing suspension of investment in modernisation and technology, which has meant that solutions that were previously fit for purpose or where there were pragmatic workarounds to offset a lack of investment, they're now struggling to cope, and they won't cope. And there are significant gaps in core systems, and 2 critical platforms nearing end of life are the old outdated finance and capital project system, which won't be supported by its technology supplier beyond 2025, and you'll hear a bit about that. We need to invest in these systems now, both for the benefit of Wellington Water to fulfil its mandate until reform, but also so the reformed entities got the systems, those critical systems, from day one. Another aside, but an important one, that holds Wellington Water back is that it doesn't own and control some of the core systems of record that are required to run a water utility. It currently piggybacks on asset management system provided by 2 suppliers and gratefully uses finance modules supplied by Wellington City Council's finance system. But there is no forecasting or budgeting function in the system, and no integration between that and there's no integration between asset and financial management. So there are big holes here. There's no fit for purpose asset management system, risk management system, health and safety system, HR system, and no customer relationship system. And they're all required, we think, as a board, for a strong and capable organisation that runs your critical public lifeline utilities. The view of the review team, I think, has been, and it's one that I share, but I'm not going to labour it, but that inadequate system support was a contributing factor to the estimation error that arose this year, and it could have been mitigated with better system support. As I say, that's not, I want to underline, that is not an excuse. It's just potentially a supporting reason. Also, you'll see here that we're acting on the review findings that suggested that the ineffectiveness of the control environment was a significant factor in the failure. And for many reasons, the appropriate prevention, detective and correction controls were not used. Personalised problem solving has been used to remedy inadequacy. And although there's good intentions with that, in an organisation with the mandate of Wellington Water, it's just not acceptable. So we've got to address the various gaps that have been identified, and that will take time. However, standing up controls, especially those controls that support transparent and accurate and timely financial reporting, and things that ensure your appetite and our appetite to demonstrate value for money, will, I think, have a really early impact on us being able to strengthen our performance. So as I said, standardisation rather than personalisation of processes rather, and that includes reporting, and ones that minimise complexity, that's really important. So for every financial report provided to councils, there are 6 versions required. In an under-resourced team, the likelihood of errors in version control remains. So some additional financial resources being secured since the review, that's 2 roles. And there is an opportunity, I think, to standardise that baseline reporting for mutual efficiency, for both cost management and resource allocation in all organisations, and then to treat your bespoke council needs separately. So as the new entity and the services are established, also having in place a well-considered and common reporting framework that is transparent and meets all your needs, that's going to be really beneficial. The beginning of that work was signalled, I think, in the statement of intent. However, aligning that work with the reporting improvements will be realised through the implementation of this plan, and that's something that that is going to be worked on. There is serious risk around infrastructure assets and long-term underinvestment in maintaining their condition through renewals. We've touched on that a few times today. We don't have a full picture of the state of the network assets, and we can't strategically plan for maintenance renewals until we have the funding to do that work. We can, though, increase attention on developing asset management plans with increased resourcing while and before the new entity is established, and on that basis, we will continue as best we can. We know that's not ideal, but that is something that we can work on. The point I do want to labour is that we recognise and empathise with the financial constraints that councils are operating under as you await the reformed entity. Part of the work that we have to embark on will be examining value for money opportunities within Wellington Water's capital and operational panels. We know you expect this, as you stated earlier this year in the statement of intent, but recent events have daylighted and underlined the need for this from a board perspective as well, and I think senior management. So we will, that will be quite a significant priority as part of the plan. Overall, although we're pitching to a future, Wellington Water actually has to be as strong as possible, as soon as possible, and you need assurance of that. We recognise that as a committee. Some of the work we can fund from internal budgets, some of it will be reprioritised. I want to be really upfront with you that some requests for funding for these end-of-life systems will come to councils through your annual planning processes. We can't dress that up in any other way. All of us have inherited a situation where proper investments have failed to be made in a growing company over time. To enable us to provide a stronger guarantee to you that the company can do its job now, and to then fold into a new water organisation, we actually have to have the discussion around where investment is required to do that. Just lastly, you'll be pleased to hear, we expect you to keep us honest, and we look forward to formal quarterly reporting on this plan, along with those face-to-face engagements that we've talked about with your individual governance groups. And part of it is about monitoring the plan, part of it's just about staying closer so we understand what's going on. So you can then account to your communities in the best way possible. But we have to ensure that both a necessary uplift in quality of service provision to shareholders and ratepayers happens at the same time as we're effectively trying to transition people and operations into a new water entity. And we're really committed to doing that and being orientated as well as we possibly can in the short term for that transition readiness. So we're set up for Wellington's future and communities and environment over the long term. I'm happy to take questions, as is Mahina, and if there are any organisational questions, Charles did a lot of the detail of the planning. So kia ora.
Thank you, Nick, for that very thorough presentation, and I will open it up. Mayor Guppy.
I'll make just a comment. Thanks, Nick, for that, because it's going to be a big change. In your comment, we've tried to keep you honest, but actually you haven't listened in the past, so it's a big direction change for the organisation.
Councillor Connolly.
So your narrative sort of veered into the next paper in terms of system investment. So I feel like my question is kind of pitched at both the papers on the table in terms of how much of the current capability plan can you manage within current baselines?
And that's something that we're grappling with, because we've got information we need to provide to Dougal for the water service delivery plans. We need to provide information to 5 councils for an annual plan and 1 council for a long-term plan, and we need to develop our own business plan as well. We've got to deliver this improvement plan, and I'm already talking to the staff about restructuring the organisation to make it simpler. So, and at the same time, keeping the plane flying. And it's a plane that's a lot bigger than it was 5 years ago. So we will need more resources, and that's something that we will be talking to the board about over the next couple of months before we finalise our business plan. And part of that's going to be how we deliver on this improvement plan. But one of the things is the organisation has not filled vacancies and has not made an attempt to get new people in place. There's a lot of hard-working people here, very loyal, very, very dedicated, very excited about the change, I have to say. And when on day one I mentioned that I was planning to restructure the organisation, normally you see but there was just nodding and excitement about it. This is a team that wants to do better and is keen to, but we will need some more bodies on the ground, and we do need some of those systems, or those IT systems, or are going to be at serious risk of failure.
I guess just further to that, and you've talked about how you're going to come back quarterly, I think, and report on how we're going with the plan, which is really, really good. And I'm really excited to see that. But I think it would be useful if we could identify which bits or what we can do. Like, I'm worried that if more money is not forthcoming, that you will be reporting a plan that isn't going anywhere. And that would be unfortunate. I'm sure there are things that can be done within current baseline. It would be useful to identify and prioritise those and then work out which actions are going to require increased investment.
Yeah, I can give you assurance that within the plan and the breakdown that it's broken into initiatives that are underway post-review and articulating. It's not like we've, as soon as we had the review, even before the review, we started a series of activities. So we've captured those. We've got things that we could do within this year, and we've started to reprioritise resources across the company towards those. Whether we can get enough resources by reprioritising to achieve all the things that we think we could do this year is another matter. And then past that, it does really come down to the annual planning process.
Got a few other questions. We've got Mayor Baker, Mayor Whānau.
It's probably more of a comment. Thank you, Nick. That was a really detailed report. It just guts me that we have to invest into these systems when we've got renewals that are so urgent, and it really worries me. Once again, we're going back to our ratepayer because what we've budgeted is going to be incorrect. So bottom line, I know it's user pays, but it's not getting any easier. But thank you. Good report.
Mayor Whānau?
Yes, thank you, Nick. And, my question comes back to cultural shift, which I'm already seeing evidence of. And I appreciate the frankness of what's happening and the non-defensiveness of all this. So thank you for that, because it has a massive impact and I think will help with the relationship moving forward. I think I'm just quite interested still in, maybe it's workstream 6 and, the suppression of information and how that's impacted on the situation that we're here today. So I think I just want more specific details as to, Pat, how you think you're going to address that. It's just an area that I'm interested in.
Could I ask Mayor Whānau as well, for your earlier, you had an earlier question about staff turnover, and I wondered if we could get Charles to answer that one at the same time. Sorry, just because I think that's,
Cool.
So I'll, in terms of being more transparency and open, one of the things, the first day when I met with staff, I outlined there's 4 things that I value in an organisation. A happy, well-performing team, good at what it does, respected for what it does, and in touch with its customers, which in this case is the six councils. But I also pointed out that being respected for what it does is not the same as popular, and that means being prepared to speak the truth to power. And you will have noticed there is a more directness today, and that's what you can expect. And I'm not sensing any resistance from the key staff about that approach, that they had mistaken popularity for respect, and they are different things. And sometimes you are going to say, oh no, here comes Wellington Water, what are they going to tell us this time? But you need to know, you need to make good decisions. And I'm feeling nothing but support for this. And someone asked me last time, how will we know when the culture changes? You'll notice around this table. I think you will have noticed it today that the answers are much more direct, and we plan to continue with that direct advice. But yeah, we may not be popular sometimes, and I'm sorry for that, but we're here to advocate for a 3 waters network. Thank you.
I think in regards to the higher turnover, you could attribute it to the review and things like that, but what we're actually seeing is that where higher than normal turnover is being created by other councils within the wider region preparing themselves for reform. So we've actually, well, it's great in one level, they're going to great things and they're still within water, but a lot of councils are creating some positions to prepare themselves for reform. And if they look within the wider region for where they could draw those people from, we have a very large pool, well, not a large pool, but a pool of very talented people that are perfect for them. And so we've lost some key, really important people that have been with us for a very long time, but we're losing them for the right reason, so to speak. And so I wouldn't think it was fair to attribute it to the review directly. I'm sure maybe there's one or two, but not in the bulk.
The other thing to just add to that is you'll all be aware that there is a looser, well, there's a greater pool of potential talent out there currently in the sector, and that gives us an opportunity to refresh and draw on that talent.
Deputy Mayor Salafora.
Thank you all. Again, a detailed report. There are a couple of things that that concern me. One is a couple of times the comment around Wellington Water's uncertainty around what the network looks like, where network failure is coming, has been raised, and yet Dougal's team, who's looking at the new entity, seem to have a very clear picture about, not perhaps very clear is not right, but a future focus on the dire state of our network. And I hope that there is communication from Wellington Water back to that entity to better understand where investment is required. The other thing that that concerns me is, Nick, you mentioned that there has been an ongoing underinvestment in your organisation, and I fear that that is very quickly about to become the problem of our regional ratepayers. And as Mayor Baker has stated, with such a need for investment in renewals, that's a pretty hard pill to swallow, quite frankly. So, yeah.
Representative Rahina August.
Oh, kia ora mai, Nick. Thank you. Agree that it was a really great update. I'm just having a look at the work stream 4 and the responsibility to shareholders, and I'm really interested in how Wellington Water is going to lift your public profile, what types of comms and events that you're planning, because I think that's really important. And it leads into work stream 6, where I consider a partnership you have with us as Mana Whenua, and how you're utilising us to get that message out, because we'd rather be part of something that's more positive than what we're having to deal with at the moment. So it'd be really great to understand what that might look like in the future. Kia ora.
I smiled at Mahina because we've had a discussion just this week, and look, I think I've said when I spoke earlier that understanding the different perspectives of shareholders and partners around the table is going to be key. And we've taken the message on directly from Mana Whenua that there's greater opportunities for communication and sharing of information and for the good things and the not so good things. So that's something I think that organisationally and at a governance level we can just improve those relationships, or I should say continue to build on them. There are now, of course, formal agreements between Wellington Water and 2 of our Mana Whenua partners, which is, I think, a positive step towards that. I think there's greater opportunity for more sort of week-to-week, day-to-day sharing, and I think it's understanding the perspective as well and building that into the work we do and the decisions we make alongside you. So appreciate the offer. And look, I've got a bit of I have to be really frank, in a perfect world, Wellington Water wouldn't have, it's always disturbed me, but this sort of individual corporate identity. But we do, and we've got to communicate the mahi that we do on behalf of the region. Well, I think we do that really effectively. I think that's really improved. But if you think about the challenges of acute water shortage, of budgetary error, it's becoming more complex, and actually we need our partners to assist us with it. So, kia ora.
Any other final questions? No? Okay. So we'll move through to the recommendations, which we've got on page 182. And just with particular reference that we have some noting and receiving recommendations, but also some endorsements in regards to what's been outlined in the report. So I'll move those to have a seconder. Mayor Baker, any discussion? The only comment I would make is just, I suppose, in addition to the question around sort of suppression of information and the likes, and Pat, you've, obviously have spoken to that. I would just say, certainly for the shareholder councils in the room as well, it will be a really important two-way street to ensure that we can enable that culture to grow and to flourish in regards to that flow of information. So it's really important that also, our individual shareholder councils ensure that there is good information that is coming right down through to the elected members as well. Because there has been, and I have seen it firsthand, examples where a different level of information filters down through to different councils. So it's going to be really important that we are able to do that. And to be quite honest, that free and frankness of making us maybe sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable is important to challenge if you don't see that happening as well, us as councils, because I know as a mayor and as an elected member, I want to have all of that information to be able to make the best decision that I can on behalf of my constituents. So that's the only addition I wanted to make in furthering the conversation. So I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. Okay, moving through to item 12, which is the systems investment options on page 195 of the agenda. And this, Helen and Julie, welcome. Sorry, we mixed it up before when I called you guys to the table earlier. So great, I'll pass it over to you, Julie. Thanks.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. I would like to introduce Helen Rayner, who is our Chief Digital Officer. Often found in the office and probably not used to this arena, but she's here to answer any detailed questions you might have on the systems and platforms they have themselves. I'll just do a quick intro. I think our Chair and CE have done a very good case for change about the need for investment. They are important. What we've got here is a high-level estimate without any contingency to replace the critical systems that we believe we need in the next 2 years. I'd like to say that this investment is not about the systems themselves, but what they enable Wellington Water to do. And for all the reasons that you've heard outlined here around being able to manage the assets and services more effectively, to give you better reporting, to be more transparent, to be more efficient, and to improve things like our cybersecurity, improve our own records management, of course, really important when we're trying to be transparent to the public as well and find things a lot easier. I'll probably leave it there and hand over for questions.
Any questions? Councillor Connolly.
Yeah, I've got quite a few actually. So that window of 15 to 25 is quite a big window. How do we narrow it down? Also, there wasn't a lot of discussion in here about, so the key proviso we made on investing more in IT systems was that it would be useful for the new organisation. There wasn't really a lot of discussion in here about what the new organisation, what we could be expecting the new organisation to use and whether we'd line that up effectively. I guess for the money, in terms of the money, if we were all to agree to spend that kind of money, could we, and we had sufficient borrowing headroom, could we borrow the money and then when we get incorporated into the new water entity, that debt would be part of the money that was transferred to the new water entity, which raises a final question from me. If some of the players around this table were to not be part of the same water entity as some of the other players, how would that play out? Sorry, that's cryptic, but I hope you all understand where I'm coming from.
So I'll have a crack at the middle question about borrowing the money. Yes, that's what we envisaged. I mean, this is no regrets expenditure, so that if we're investing in this, this is a system that we can then hand over to the new organisation, and they're a year or 2 years further down the track with getting that running than they would be if we don't have that. And that was our vision, that someone would borrow this money on behalf of Wellington Water Limited, and then that debt would be transferred across to the new organisation as part of their establishment costs. So that's the plan in that respect. In terms of if one council doesn't want to, or some councils don't come across, maybe for the first year or 18 months, it's interest-only payments, which would be a fair cost on everybody, and then the original loan transfers to the company, and then it's the shareholders of the new company that would pick up the debt. So I think that's questions 2 and 3, and I will turn to my right for question 1.
Ros, can you repeat question 1, please? I didn't catch it, sorry.
It was just 15 to 25 million is quite a big window. What is your, and you've also actually in the paper talked about a heap of systems that need renewal. I'm guessing there'll be, that this will come back to us with a bit more refinement around exactly what systems we're talking about, what products we might be looking to buy, and a bit more of an accurate cost. So at this stage, you're just looking for kind of support to proceed. But so that number is big. How quickly can we narrow it down? And also the working between the new organisation and what we're doing here, and ensuring that actually what we buy will be fit for purpose for the future.
Yep, that number is a high-level estimate without any contingency. There's more work to be done. It may be bigger. These things can go either way. There are discussions being had between us and Dougal around the future, trying to get that, trying to line it up. We know that where the timings are on some of the decisions, that we're going to have to just keep going with providing advice to you into the long-term plan or the annual plan. And then hopefully at some point there'll be more clarity about what the decisions are going to be around the future of entities and so on.
I guess there's, as I say, there's also like a whole cornucopia of systems mentioned here that need to be re-looked at. Will we be able to come back with some prioritisation, if that budget is beyond what is affordable?
So all the systems that we've put there are ones that we believe that we need and that a future entity would need to manage all those different facets of its business. We have prioritised them. We've got 2 systems that are end of life, and we've got other systems like the finance and asset system as the next cabs off the rank, so to speak, and then a CRM, and then more from there. So we have already prioritised them, but it is significant investment.
If I can just expand. So I asked Vanessa, our comms manager, why we don't, when we have a catastrophic pipe failure, why we don't mention the age of the pipe in the press release. And she tells me that sometimes it takes too long to find out the age of the pipe for the information to be timely. Nelson City, I bring up the GIS, I would hover over a pipe with my mouse and it would tell me the age, the diameter, and the size. We have to go and look that up manually. Jeremy talks about when he was at looking after treatment plants, the regional council, that the expenditure was linked to the asset, and he could very quickly bring up a maintenance history and a cost history for all the assets that he managed. When he moved from the regional council to Wellington Water, that stopped because he walked away from that wonderful asset management system to a borrowed system. And I'd like to talk about that a bit more perhaps in the workshop. But there's a lot of core stuff behind the scenes that we should have, that we don't have, that makes our job a whole lot harder. It really does.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Sadler-Fuller, then Mayor Guppy.
Just wanted to start by saying that accounting standards normally say that cloud-based systems can't be funded by borrowing, so that could be problematic depending on what you're looking at. Like Councillor Connolly, I've got a few questions as well. I'm interested to know what investigation has been done to find cheaper alternatives to the ones that you have, that are involved in this proposal, and what the cost division across shareholders looks like. I'm interested to understand what measures you've taken for internal savings, rather than seeing this gap in your systems and processes and coming to your shareholders for full funding. And we keep hearing a lot about the transition to the new entity, and that concerns me greatly because there is no certainty at this point around what that new entity will look like. And I think the understanding that the new entity is Wellington Water with a new logo is probably a dangerous place
I don't
to
think
sit.
that's not the assumption we're making.
No,
but Wellington Water will be a component of that entity.
It will be.
And I think, yeah, sorry, keep going.
It will be for some or perhaps most. But is this time of transition the right time for such significant investment in upgrades? So they're my questions.
In terms of upgrades, I think we've made it pretty clear that there are some systems that will not be supported past next year. Mm-hmm. So if you forget we can discuss the future entity and what it might or might not look like. This is an immediate requirement for Wellington Water to be able to operate for as long as it needs to in its current state. These are, and this is about a long-term lack of, once again, investment in basic products and basic systems to support a company that's grown and provides, as you know, very important services. So I think we should, to take your point, deal with the immediate, and that's what we will bring to you. We've indicated, that part of the plan is going to be looking at the panel situation, and we see that as there might be potential for value for money savings there. So that is part of the work we're doing. But at the same time, Wellington Water is it employs people and capital passes through. There's not much more to the organisation. So it really is, it's important that we flag additional cost requirements with our shareholders, as early as possible. I just would say, in defence of the new entity discussion, we're not making any assumptions. What we want to ensure for our shareholders today is that the investments that you make actually have a value beyond the life of, which could be a 2-year life. So I think that's not only the strategic thing to do, but it's also the to try and be, it's the most prudent thing to do as well.
Mayor Guppy. There are a couple of other. Yeah, apologies. Sorry. No.
Just hand over to Helen on some of those details.
Sure. The estimates that we have at the moment are very high level, and that's why the range exists. The process that we'll go through to get more certainty of cost for councils is the procurement process. For those 2 systems that are the burning platforms, that are the ones that come end of life, we've already begun that procurement process, and we've done that through reprioritising funding within the current budget to enable us to move on that. And then we will do the same through the continuing business planning process for those other systems. I'd also just note, re the change effort to do this kind of implementation of systems now when we have possible change ahead of us. When we have possible change ahead of us, it de-risks that future change, because if these systems are taken as the core of a new entity, then we have an operational system for hopefully a majority of current councils to continue operating through that transition to a new entity. We're not trying to stand up a system and migrate data at the same time as standing up a new entity. And same for the capital program, right? So we really don't want to see a dip in that capital program through the transition to a new entity. So if we already have a fit-for-purpose system supporting that capital program, then we de-risk that. I hope that answers your other two questions.
Mayor Guppy?
Yeah, just I agree with Councillor Connolly, particularly with if council's putting in for this now and they're not going to be part of the future organisation, what happens then. But I mean, I accept that some of the systems may not be serviced after next year, so we do need more detail, and the fact that the cost to that, I mean, the timing is disaster, absolute disaster. I mean, of what we've been told this morning, I mean, this just hasn't come to light in the last few weeks, and the you know, from Upper Hutt's point of view, on what we see here and the costing, we will not be able to support that because we just couldn't afford it.
Representative Modlick?
Yes, thank you, everyone. Look, just a couple of observations and a question. There's no scenario, no realistic scenario going forward that doesn't see us effectively result in the transfer of the relevant expertise and assets that are currently used to maintain and renew our region's water assets. There's no scenario where that doesn't transfer. So this is not a dead cost if it's expended. The second observation is that it has been a bit of a shock to learn actually the degree to which workarounds and I'll call them workaround systems have been utilised for such a protracted period of time to undertake the work that is the responsibility of Wellington Water. It's been a bit of a shock to learn actually how poor and non-fit for purpose they are, and which begs a number of questions. The last observation and then really a question is, having spent quite a significant portion of my professional career involved with the implementation of technology and change projects, that while the numbers, the high-level numbers signalled are eye-watering, they need to be kept in perspective in relation to the asset base that's actually been managed and the scale of the work program in front of us. You know, we've been talking about billions of dollars of renewal work going forward. We already have billions of dollars of assets in the ground, and the data that is available to make decisions on that at the moment are kept in spreadsheets and the like, which is embarrassing, frankly. So my question going forward is, I think it is reasonable to surface for the committee the indicative scale of the investment required to get onto a sound platform for doing this work. I think that's reasonable. My question is, if you're able to signal, though, at a high level, is what is the timing and process that you're expecting to be able to refine those costs, and more particularly to signal to the committee the specific approach you will take to mitigate the risks that everyone is very familiar with associated with large-scale IT implementations, just indicatively at this early stage to perhaps soothe the nerves of our committee, given the scale of the request here. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Helmut. To the first point about when we can give more detail, more accurate costs. So the recommended order of investment is those end-of-life systems first, and we've already begun the procurement process for those. The aim would be to know by the end of this calendar year a more accurate cost. That will then enable us to know whether we can adjust our current business plan to absorb some of the implementation costs and how much more we would need to put into the annual planning process. The next recommended investment is the integrated asset and financial system, and we would like to begin procurement processes on that this year as well. We will need to adjust our business plan if we can to do that. That would again give us more accurate costs and know how much we need to put into the annual planning process. The aim to be implementing those systems in the next financial year. The third recommended investment is in the customer relationship management systems, and that would be in the FY 26-27 year with procurement next year, so we would have more certainty around that then. If our councils would like to look deeper into the systems and that recommendation, we're also able to adjust that phased plan, and we have thorough information on the estimated costs for the full set, everything that's required, and that information was collated with an external partner that has good experience in this space. De-risking these kind of projects, everybody worries about IT projects, we'll be making sure that we do fund them adequately so we can get the required resource to support us to do this. You know, I do have a team of very expert people in technology, but they're not currently looking after these core systems because we don't have them. So we will need to engage the right expertise to help us with this.
Can I just say quickly, lastly, sorry, Mr. Chair. From my experience, large-scale IT implementations are not vexed because of budget, and they're not actually vexed because of the systems themselves. There are other issues relating to scope creep, relating to governance, relating to risk management, all of that people stuff, which always vexes us, is really where the secret sauce lies. And I look forward to hearing more about how those risks are mitigated from that perspective moving forward. Thank you for that. Kia ora.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, yes.
Sorry, just going back to an earlier question, I did ask about the cost division of the 15 to 25 million across the shareholders and what that might look like.
Can I just address that? Because it's been raised a couple of times. I don't think that's an answer for Wellington Water. I think that's an answer, that's a shareholder discussion. Am I wrong about that? I mean, we can provide the information at the appropriate time, but it's for shareholders to decide. And, you know, you will have knowledge of where you're heading to in ways that we won't.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yep. It's a good point. Okay. Yep. Okay, so we'll now move through to the recommendations, and I've got some additional recommendations which I've put up on the screen, and I think I hope that these do touch on some of the questions that have been asked around that particular challenge of what investment will then serve a new entity as well, which is really important, obviously, with this. So I'll just go through them. Endorses in principle that investment in end-of-life systems, integrated asset and financial systems and customer systems is required to enable the effective and efficient functioning of Wellington Water. That's as in your papers. Notes that the total required investment for these options is currently estimated to be 15 to 25 million over 2 financial years, exclusive of contingency, with an ongoing operating cost of 4 to 5 million per annum, and that this will form part of Wellington Water's investment advice for councils to consider in their annual plan processes. Notes that this recommended investment does not address all issues with the current state of Wellington Water's technology systems, and further investment would be required in out years if the organisation continues to operate significantly in an HR system. Notes that the timing of a funding request for IT systems upgrades in next year's annual plan is complicated by the uncertainty of water reform and the potential for transition to a new water entity. Endorses further analysis by Wellington Water of the investment needed in the asset, financial and customer systems required to enable the effective and efficient functioning of Wellington Water. requests that this analysis should be integrated into the shareholding council's decision-making process as part of their water service delivery plans and its associated implementation plan to ensure any investment is value for money for the long-term future entity. Requests that Wellington Water provide advice to councils on the prioritisation of IT system upgrades versus urgent physical works as part of that investment advice and the long-term plan processes. That's it. Yep. So they're mostly as outlined in the notes before us, but it's just particularly adding in the additional complexity of transition and a new water entity set up. Pat?
Mr. Chairman, if we could ask that, because it's always important that those numbers are stated correctly the first time. I don't know why we provided you with a range of numbers that didn't include a contingency, but they don't. So if you gave the words excluding contingency after the words 15 to 25 million, I'd be grateful and promise that the next time we bring numbers, they will have the contingency in them.
Yep. Yeah, Councillor Connolly?
I don't know how comfortable people are around the table with supporting these, but if there was some uncomfortableness given people's financial situations, I wondered if for recommendation 1, we should just make it a little bit more vague in terms of investment in end-of-life IT systems and not list out what they are, so that when they bring them back, we have further opportunity to prioritise and refine. I appreciate the fact that the team has told us that they're all urgent, and we are being severely hampered by lack of all of these systems, but we do have the financial realities that we're working in.
I mean, I think certainly the information I've had presented to me, and when I look at this in context of the report that we received, I'm comfortable to endorse an in-principle approach of the need to look at these systems. Ultimately, we know that the individual councils will be making the funding decision, so that's not a consideration for this committee. They will need to go through that process. But I think it's important we send a strong message as the shareholder committee that this does need to be prioritised and focused on through those annual plan processes for each council. I think that does this. So I'm not as comfortable in watering it down.
I guess I'm interested to hear from people that have just said it's not on the cards in the current financial climate. Like, are they happy endorsing the fact that?
I didn't want to touch on those comments, but I feel like that's a difficult position to take when this hasn't even come to individual councils yet anyway. I mean, I don't know. But that's not what we're not weighing up the financial considerations here. That will be for individual councils. We're wanting to give some direction with this recommendation. Yep, Mia Whānau.
I'm still trying to articulate what I want to say. So for the record, we want to do this, yes. So I've sent through some extra recommendations to provide comfort for number 1. I think I just need a minute seeing them. Huh? They're up there. And I'm still just comparing what has. Maybe can you outline what has anything changed to the original recommendations?
That's just what I outlined in respect of if we go down from 4.
So they've been added. Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay. Mayor Baker?
I'm happy. I don't want to water it down. It needs to actually say what's missing. So I'd just like to leave it as is.
Okay. Mayor Guppy, did you?
No, I'm just saying that I won't be supporting this because the timing and the affordability is just. I mean, I understand the background, but with an open-ended thing like that, with the costings, we just won't be supporting it.
Okay. So I'll move the recommendations that are in front of us. Do I have a seconder? Mayor Baker. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no.
No.
I declare that carried. And would you like that noted, Mayor Guppy? Yep. Okay, thank you. We'll move on. Item 13, which is the Ford program. Any questions on the Ford program? I'll move that we receive a note to the draft Ford program and workshops, seconded by Mayor Baker. Any discussion? All those in say aye. Questions. So we'll now move to exclusion of the public, and I'll ask the public be excluded from the following parts of this meeting. Item 16, which is the public excluded minutes from the 26th of July. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Connolly. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried.